Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be doing an updated Tearlament list. Now, a pure Tearlament deck such as this is honestly poised to do pretty well in the upcoming format, similarly to the Lightsworn Tearlament list I posted the other day, just because it's looking like with the release of Justice Hunters, that the format is going to be shifting to a more board breaker-esque type of format, as opposed to a hand trap heavy format, which is just something that this deck very much prefers. So with that in mind, let's just jump straight into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and when it comes to a pure Tearlament deck, we're basically just maxing out on all the Tearlament monsters. So, as a result, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart, as it's pretty much the go-to starter in the deck, right? As we don't really normal summon, so this is pretty much going to be taking that spot every single time, and what it does is, when it's normal or special summon, you can foolish any of your Tearlament monsters from your deck to the graveyard, except Tearlaments Reinoheart, right? So, if you want to send a Tear Cache to mill, you can do that, or if you want to fusion summon, you send any of the other guys. But this is basically the card that just gets your entire engine rolling. Now, it doesn't really do much by itself because Kick Close is banned, but even so, like, it's still very much a necessary part of the deck in order for it to function. Then for the other 3 of, it's of course going to be Tearlaments Kashtira, who on normal or special summon is able to mill 3 cards, and then when it's sent to the graveyard, it's able to mill 2 cards. And it's also able to special summon itself during either player's main phase, because it's a quick effect, which is a pretty cool thing because that means that if you have multiples, you can do one during your turn, then you can do one again during your opponent's turn, or even if you don't have multiples, you're probably going to be adding this card back at some point. So yeah, just like another great piece that allows us to mill as many cards as possible. Then for the 1 of Tears, the 1 of Merrli, the 1 of Havnis, and the 1 of Scheiren, they all mill 3 depending on if you meet the requirements, and more importantly, they're the ones that allow us to actually fusion summon, which pretty much makes up like the majority of our extra deck, right? So yeah, pretty important to the deck, not gonna lie. That's it for the Tearlaments, and then for the other cards that we're going to be playing in the monster lineup, we are still going to be playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. It doesn't help the deck out in the slightest when it comes to actually comboing, but what it does do is that it allows us to at least have a fighting chance against any Mulch armies that we do get hit by. Now, I'm not going to lie, when it comes to pure Tearlament, even though we can't go just like Kick Close, Search Sulliek, Pass, we are honestly somewhat resilient to the Charmies to like a certain extent, right? Like, we don't have to commit fully in order to make like a full board, but we still want the opportunity to do so, which is why I'm playing this. But if you want to start cutting anywhere, I'd probably start here, just because hand traps don't tend to mesh well with this type of deck, at least in the case of like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Then for the other cards that we are going to be playing, we are of course going to be having a Fiendsmith engine, just because it pretty much just allows us to take the deck to the next level, as it gives us grind game and then unbelievable power plays to our consistency by increasing our consistency. There we go. So we have 2 Fiendsmith engraver, the 1 Lacrima the Crimson Tears, and the 1 Fabled Lurrie. Really standard package, nothing too crazy about it. It's going to do Fiendsmith things, which in this deck is actually going to be Pilgrim Reaper Turbo. We don't really care about Caesar too much because we are playing other cards that allow us to protect ourselves from special summons, but when I built this deck, it's basically with the intention of using these to pretty much only make Pilgrim Reaper and mill 5. So yeah, perfectly fine at doing what it does. And then for the other cards, we're playing 1 Bystial Magnamut as well as 1 Bystial Druiswurm. Bystials are still phenomenal cards, and there are so many light and dark decks that these cards pretty much just like add another dimension to the deck, right? Because it gives us a playable hand trap that we can use against our opponent offensively and defensively. And there's just so many cool things that we can do with them. Namely, like, even if you're not using them to banish your opponent's resources or like preventing them from playing or whatever, you can still use them as level 6 extenders, because like I said, we're literally only going into Pilgrim Reaper. So just having like an additional level 6 to be able to do that whenever we want is greatly appreciated. Then for the other cards, we're playing the 1 Mudora, the Sword Oracle, to be able to shuffle back cards. And then lastly, the 1 Beastking of the Swamps, which means that we are going to be playing cards like Tearlaments Rukulos in the extra deck. And that's one of the main reasons why I just opted to only play the Pilgrim Reaper instead of Pilgrim Reaper plus Caesar. But, I love Rukulos, so I'll take any opportunity I can to try and play with her in the deck. So yeah, 1 Beastking of the Swamps for that. But if you don't want to play Rukulos, you can also just play like the Fusion Grapha if you just want like a pseudo negate instead, but I prefer Rukulos. So yeah, with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Kicking off the spell and trap lineup, we are of course going to be playing 3 of the Primeval planet Perlereino. It's just much like Reinoheart, pretty much the go-to starter in the deck, right? You activate it, you search your deck for any tier, boost all your tiers and fusion by 500, and it pops cards whenever a tier gets shuffled back. Cards broken, no reason not to play 3. Then, to accompany our 3 planets, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Scream, which just allows us to mill 3 more cards whenever you or your opponent decides to normal or special summon and you control a face-up tier. And then if that resolves, your opponent's monsters also lose 500 attack until the end of the turn, which is oddly relevant because it means that they're going to have an awkward time being able to beat you or just like run over your board. So yeah, pretty strange card that it has that additional effect, but we'll take what we can get, right? And then when this one is sent to the graveyard, it searches out all your Tearlament traps. That's it for the 3-ofs, and then for the 2-ofs, we're only playing one card at 2, being Super Polymerization. Now, I don't really know if I want to continue playing Super Polymerization or if I want to switch over to Forbidden Droplet, just because Forbidden Droplet does have a lot of really good uses against like the Canine deck, as well as like the Vanquish Soul, Pure variants, and all that stuff. But I feel like Super Poly just across the board is better into most matchups, or more matchups, which is the reason why I'm playing it. But I've said this before in the past, but those are the two cards that I'm constantly flipping between, right? So it's either Super Poly or it's Droplet. But it's honestly up to you and what you feel like you're going to be playing against more. If you feel like you're playing against more Vanquish Soul and Canine, I'd probably go with the Droplet over the Super Poly, but when it comes to like lower level events like regionals or locals, I'd probably stick with Super Poly over Droplet just because you never really know what you're going to be playing and you'd want to have as much, you want to be able to go into as many matchups as possible, right? So if you want, you can just do 2 of these and then side the other ones and then go from there. That's it for the 2-ofs, and then for the 1-ofs, we're playing the 1-of Foolish Burial to send any monster, the 1-of Foolish Burial Goods to send any spell or trap, the 1 Tearlaments Grief, which allows us to special summon a Tearlament monster from either our graveyard or our deck, and then we have to send something with the same type or attribute from our field to the graveyard. And this is just really great at just helping us have like another way to be able to summon out a monster, right? So there's a lot of really cute things you can do with this. Like say you've gone for the Pilgrim Reaper and you just want to get rid of it, so you can special summon something like say Tearlaments Merrli, and then you send the Pilgrim Reaper and then your Merrli will activate to mill 3. Or if you don't even have like a monster in the field, that's perfectly fine as well. You can summon out a Reinoheart, then send the Reinoheart that you summoned, and then the Reinoheart's graveyard effect will trigger to bring itself back. Or if you just want to like fusion summon a Merrli, send a Merrli, fusion summon, whatever. Like this card just, it's so cool with what the applications that it provides with the deck. And then its other effect is when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you're able to add a banished trap, which also comes up pretty frequently, especially because we tend to banish traps off of our Tearlaments Kashtira pretty often. So having another resource that just gets them back is greatly appreciated. Then for the other 1-of spells, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith Tract and the 1 Fiendsmith Sanct. These are the cards that you search off of your engraver, and they just allow you to go into the Fiendsmith engine a lot more easily, right? But in the case of Fiendsmith Tract, you of course also have the added bonus of being able to discard a card. So say for example, you add a a Fabled Lurrie. There we go. You don't have to discard it, right? You can discard something like a Tearlaments Sulliek or just any of your other cards that might trigger instead, get those guys, and then you can still normal summon the Lurrie and go full combo from there. And this is just Hornet Drones, but in Fiendsmith form. And then for the final 2 spells, we're playing the 1 Triple Tactics Talent and the 1 Call by the Grave to potentially punish our opponent for playing hand traps and also stop hand traps. That's it for the spells, and then for the traps, we're playing the 2 Tearlaments Sulliek to be able to negate our opponent's monsters, but more importantly, this is also another avenue that we have available to us to be able to search out any Tearlament monsters, because that's what it does whenever it's sent to the grave by card effect. Then we have Tearlaments Metanoise, which is a potential Book of Moon, but also more importantly, when it's sent to the graveyard, it adds back a Tearlament monster from our graveyard, and that's pretty important for being able to add back key cards like our Tearlaments Kashtira that we normally don't have access to once they hit the grave, right? So yeah, pretty solid card. We're also playing 1 Trivikarma, which when it's in the graveyard, we can banish it, and then in turn search our deck for every single one of our Tearlaments spells and traps because they all happen to mention Visa Starfrost. And then lastly, we have the 1 Fiendsmith in Paradise, which is just like another extension of the Fiendsmith engine that gives us another layer of interaction during our opponent's turn, because this is always going to be sending Desiree, and then Desiree is going to be interrupting our opponent. So with that, that's a spell and trap lineup, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion of the video, we'll be starting off with the Exceed monsters first, and the first card we're going to be talking about is Time Thief Redoer. So either you're playing Redoer or you're playing number 62 Garrus, the Timeless. And me personally, I just prefer Redoer because I feel like it provides more utility to the deck. And the most important aspect is that it's able to detach Scheiren as part of the effect, which means that we pretty much have like a built-in way to be able to activate Scheiren's fusion summon effect whenever we want. And as opposed to if we're playing Dugaris, then we're basically just using that not even for like the boost or the summon. It's typically just to draw 2, discard 1, which, I mean, consistency wise, that's great. You know, you draw 2, discard a Sulliek, trigger the Sulliek search. But I really enjoy the utility, and every single one of these effects is really solid, right? So first off, during every standby phase, you're able to take the top card of your opponent's deck and then attach it as material. So that means you're able to potentially take a key resource away from your opponent, and then from there, you're going to be able to activate one of 3 effects depending on what you have as material. If it's a monster, it banishes itself until the end phase. If it's a spell, you get to draw a card. And if it's a trap, you get to bounce the face-up card on your opponent's side of the field to the top of their deck. So yeah, all 3 effects are really solid. Being able to take, like I said, key cards is pretty cool, especially if it's like a one-of that they really needed. And like I said, I just really prefer the utility that Redoer offers, but there's no like correct answer in most situations, right? And sometimes the Daenerys is going to matter more. Sometimes the Redoer matters more. It really just is a case-by-case basis. And then for the other Exceed, we're playing the 1 Pilgrim Reaper because we play rank 6 turbo with the Fiendsmith engine. And this card just allows us to detach a material, and then we both mill 5. And by both, I mean you and your opponent. So you get free knowledge about what your opponent is playing, and you're able to mill 5, so it's literally just Kelbeck and Agito, right? It's just in Exceed form. That's literally it. The boost effect doesn't matter because this card's pretty much always going to be linked off immediately. And like I said, we're not playing Caesar in this build just because we are going to be playing cards like Rucolos instead, but there are a lot of situations where you do end up playing Caesar, but this is just not one of them. And that's it for the Exceeds. And then for the links, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith Requiem to be able to summon out our Engravers and our Lacrimas from the deck. Moon of the Closed Heaven, so any 2 monsters becomes full Fiendsmith combo. Fiendsmith Sequence, which admittedly we don't really use all that much because we very much prefer using the Fiendsmith Desiree as a target for our Fiendsmith in Paradise instead of hard summoning it, but we still want the option. And the cool thing about Sequence is that we can also use it to summon out cards like Tearlaments Heart because it is a fiend monster. So, you know, cool tip, just in case you have a bunch of Tearlament monsters in your graveyard with nothing to fuse, or with no way to fuse with them, right? Because you already used their effects and you milled them or whatever, but just something to keep in mind. Then we're also playing the 1 IP Masquerna, which allows us to go into either the SP Little Knight or the Sprite Sprint, which is pretty much just going to be Foolishing Merrli, or in games 2 and 3, provided the time rules are still the same, we're going to be sending Scattershot. But it's mainly just to send Merrli. That's it for the links, though. And then for the fusions, we're playing the 1 Necroquip Princess, as well as the 1 Fiendsmith Desiree. So like I said, the Desiree is basically just there for Paradise, and then the Necroquip Princess allows us to turn any light fiend into a level 6 monster so that we can make Pilgrim Reaper a lot more easily. Then for the other fusions, we're playing the 1 Muddragon of the Swamp, the 1 Guru Wings of Resident Life, the 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia, all of which are super poly targets, but we also make them naturally throughout the game's course. So yeah, pretty good cards in Tearlament, I would say. And then for the final 2 monsters, we're playing Tearlaments Rucolos, which is just another way that we can attempt to stop special summons from happening because it negates special summons, but they have to activate, right? It doesn't stop inherent summons. So if you summon like a synchro monster from the extra deck, you can't stop that with Rucolos, but if your opponent decides to activate like a branded fusion, you can stop that. So basically, if it starts a chain, Rucolos can stop it. If it doesn't start a chain, Rucolos can't stop it. And then lastly, we have the Tearlaments Heart, which on special summon, it's able to on special summon, it's able to shuffle any card on your opponent's field back into the deck. And then it also gets that effect whenever a Aqua monster is sent from the deck to the graveyard. So yeah, pretty cool card. And then when it's also sent from the field to the graveyard by card effect, you're able to special summon it and then Foolish any Tearlament card from your deck to the graveyard. So just an overall general nuisance that when it hits the field is incredibly difficult for your opponent to deal with. And with that, that's the Tearlament list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!